Confessions of a Long-Arm Quilter, How to Make Your Long-Arm Professional Smile by Tara Bierman of Inabine Services. Please remember that there are as many opinions on how to as there are long-armers, so discuss expectations with your long-arm quilter. As I prepared for this presentation, I had my thoughts on what makes me smile, and then I asked my other long-arm peers what they would like their clients to know. We all had the same ideas, advice, and suggestions. This is not a list of do's and don'ts, rather a little helpful list and a little helpful information to make the best quilt that you can. So it is my hope that you will take away something new from this and not be intimidated. We are here to help you create a beautiful keepsake. To start, your long-arm quilter needs to know the purpose for your quilt. Is it a gift, something for yourself, wall art, kennel quilt, picnic quilt, or show entry? Knowing the purpose will help in deciding what style of quilting should be executed. While a non-committal, "anything is fine" comment might seem freeing, it can cause distress because we desire for you to love your quilt and be happy. When I am given that freedom, I usually let the quilt pattern or fabric dictate the quilting, along with who it will be for, male or female, child, teen, or adult. Two things that can have an adverse effect on the finished quilt are thread color and batting. If you are piecing dark fabrics, you might want to consider dark thread, since the seams may be slightly stretched once on the frame and quilted, showing white threads on a dark background. Vice versa if you use dark thread on light fabric. Batting can also affect the finished result. It can affect the desired type of quilting as well. If you want dense, custom quilting, you would want a low loft batting. A puffy trapuntal style, you'd want a higher loft, or you can use two battings in one quilt. How do you want it to look? Antique finish? Crinkle? Puffy? Smooth? How will it be used? If you plan on needing to launder it frequently, you will want a batting that can hold up to that. What is your budget? With the variety of battings out there, you should be able to find one you can afford that won't compromise the look you desire. You might be curious why I have mentioned safety in connection with your quilt. 100% cotton breathes, but can harbor allergens, such as mites. In the event of fire, it will burn, but fall away. 100% polyester does not breathe. It can be hot, since it holds in heat, and in the event of fire, it will melt on you, but it does not harbor allergens. Cotton poly blends are popular, budget-friendly, and wear well. There are also environmentally friendly battings available like wool, soy, and bamboo. The sky's the limit for batting choices. Seams. They are important. There has been much debate concerning whether you press your seams one direction or open. There are reasons for both. Open seams help keep bulky intersections to a minimum, which will assist the long-arm quilter in smoothly moving across a quilt top. But do not expect to have your top stitched in the ditch if you have open seams. I personally won't do it because it is only stitching the stitching, not the quilt top itself. It will not hold up long. As for your backing, it is recommended that any backing seams be 1/2 inch and pressed open to alleviate bulk on the frame and in the finished quilt. It is also preferred the backing have the seam run parallel with our rollers. It can be loaded vertically but can cause issues with bulk and uneven tension. Removing all salvage edges allows the fabric to move, since those edges can be quite thick and throw off the tension. Multiple seams going both vertically and horizontally can also cause issues such as puckering and deformation. Make sure you discuss this with your long-arm quilter to alleviate any issues. If you desire to challenge your long-arm quilter, handing them a pieced backing that you want square to the top will do just that. Due to how we load the top and backing, it can be almost impossible to get it perfectly centered. Please discuss this type of request with your long-arm quilter. Some are up for any challenge. The dreaded question: is my quilt top and backing square? If your top isn't square, the finished result will not be square and can cause lots of issues as the top is quilted. To find the square, fold your top in half, keeping the fold smooth. Do the corners meet and edges run together? Fold again so it's in quarters. Do the corners all meet? Now is the time to straighten those edges and make it square. The reason you need the backing square is so that it goes on the frame straight without walking as the quilt is advanced during the quilting process. I have had to square many backings before installing, so I know it is loaded and advancing correctly. Learning this skill will help your long-arm quilter finish your quilt faster. In the process of handling your quilt, to press, find square, measure, and load, Seam ends can come apart. Tension placed on the top in the frame can also pull apart seams. Stay stitching around the perimeter can alleviate this problem and keep things square. This is needed specifically if you have pieced a border or done blocks on the bias. Please learn the technique for adding borders correctly. While I agree there are no quilt police, there are some techniques that will help you produce quality quilts and make your long arm quilters smile. Wavy borders are not being friendly. They tend to be a result of an out-of-square top, inaccurate quarter-inch seam allowances, or borders that were not measured correctly before adding. I am guilty of this and was convicted to learn properly by my sweet, kind long-arm quilter and the fact that I hated having to add a seam to deal with the excess. And no, not everything can be quilted out. So how do you measure for accurate borders? Measuring through the center and a third of the way on each end will give you an idea if your top is square and what your border measurement should be. If you have center 36 inches, then ends 37 inches and 36.5 inches respectively, there is some discrepancy in your piecing. Add these three numbers together and divide by 3, you get a 36.5 inch average. You will need to cut your border 36.5 inches and ease the excess length in. Many people think you can take two pieces of a border, sew them together, then stitch them down the side of the quilt. This is when you start getting wavy borders. You need to measure accurately and have the right size length. Sometimes I think we secretly are magicians, but really, ingenuity, a can of soup, spray starch, and a hot iron can do much to deal with fullness, puckers, and a slightly wavy border. If the client isn't particular, just folding it under and stitching it down can be effective as well as hand stitching a seam. The only issue can be if it affects the block's appearance. Communication is important here as to how the client would like the long arm quilter to proceed, so please learn how to add accurate borders. Here's some reasons why we request so much more backing and batting. As it is quilted, the fabrics tend to shrink and take up the excess. I created a quilt that measured 93 inches square before quilting, 90 inches square after. The quilting drew up 3 inches overall. We need fabric to attach the fabric to our leaders and have ample room to clamp, allowing the machine bed to move freely underneath. The bottom photo is a recent quilt I did where the top was 54 inches long and the backing was 57 inches long. It takes about 2 inches to be pinned to my canvas, top and bottom, plus the take-up from the quilting. I had barely 3 inches to work with. I basted the top as close as I dared to the top zipper and proceeded to quilt. When I worked my way down to the bottom, I decided to trim away some of the batting so I could see the end. I was very fortunate I hadn't already stitched into the zipper or hit a pin. So please remember to add that extra 8 inches in length and width. We really do use it. The bane of my long arm existence, wandering threads. Please inspect your top for long thread tails and errant fabric threads that have decided they want to be part of the show. The long arm quilter pictured spent 45 minutes clipping threads on a client quilt. 45 minutes she could have been quilting a beautiful keepsake. This seemed to be one of the biggest issues my long arm gals commented on when asked what would they like clients to know. You might ask, what does it matter? Here's also a good example as to why thread choice is important in piecing a top. Nothing makes a long arm quilter more ill than happily quilting along, envisioning your beautiful quilt completed with near flawless stitches and the machine snags. Colorful words might create a rainbow over their heads. It not only causes an interruption in the design flow, but also can break a needle and or put a hole in your quilt. It's also possible to sew the foot into the quilt. Please inspect your top for open or weak seams. Again, accurate quarter-inch seams help to alleviate this issue. As I advance a quilt, I do inspect the top for threads, seam issues, and thick intersections. I do charge to repair a seam in the hope that it will encourage the client to be diligent. The smaller photo shows an example of a quilt I recently did that gave me a surprise at the end. All I can guess is that after attaching it and rolling the top up, the seam gave way under the pressure because it didn't look like that when I had loaded it. This I wouldn't charge for because I am sure it wasn't present before. I repaired it right where it was. I unpinned the border, flipped it right sides together, stitched it with a quarter-inch seam right to the backing, flipped it back right side up, and basted the edges down, finishing the quilting. Phew! Add that to my arsenal of magic tricks. Please refrain from adding embellishments to the quilt until after it is quilted. Crystals, beads, buttons, etc. are great for extra fun on a quilt, but can cause a quilting nightmare. It is also preferred that your fabric come fur-free. It's just as annoying picking off pet hair as it is removing errant threads, and your long-arm quilter may have an allergy. It's also possible it could transfer to another client's project, who may be allergic. Speaking of allergies, using scented products can cause issues with your long-arm quilter if they have allergies to certain chemicals, mold, fragrances, and cigarette smoke. It may also cause a delay in quilt completion if the long-arm quilter needs to air the fabric before work can begin. Scents also can transfer to other client projects since our workspaces tend to be small and projects are in close proximity. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. While most long-arm quilters may do a courtesy pressing, expecting them to do heavy pressing may cost you. Again, it takes away from them finishing your beautiful quilt. Upon arrival at my studio, quilts are either hung up on my design wall, hung over a frame, or neatly folded and stored on a quilt rack, ensuring the fabrics stay neat and respected. Now that you know what we would like from you, here is what you should expect from us. Your long-arm quilter should be professional, honest, and confident. They should also be proficient in piecing quilt tops, since you may need their advice and support with your own concerns. I am regularly seeking avenues to improve my skills through classes, workshops, and other challenges. Clear communication is key. Be specific in what you want your quilt to look like. A long-arm quilter that has an intake sheet or a contract is a great indicator of their level of professionalism. I consider this paper my second brain. It helps me keep the client's desires clear and make sure we agree on what the finished outcome should be. And if I can't get to the quilt for a few days or so, it is all written down there for me to remember. You should expect your quilt to be finished in a timely manner. That might depend on their workload and how they run their business. My turnaround time is less than 2 weeks currently. If you have a specific time frame to have it completed by, give your long-arm quilter plenty of time to do it. Lack of planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on the long-arm quilter's part. Expect their best. We want you to be pleased with our work. It comes down to good communication, skill level, and the love of the art. Again, remember, this is not a do and don't type of situation with your long-arm quilter. We want you to enjoy the art of quilting, and we want you to have a beautiful quilt when we're all done. These are just some suggestions to help all of that go smoothly. I hope you have enjoyed Confessions of a Long-Arm Quilter and will now be eager to join with your long-arm quilter in creating a beautiful keepsake to appreciate and love forever. Thank you.